Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. All right.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
did you send me your
Yeah.
articles as yet? I need
Right.
somebody to
I've got
write.
it typed up and I'll send it out to you.
I need somebody to write like a nice cover article, for the front page.
So mine is it will be a cover article. It's
Okay,
leading
that sounds
into
good.
going through the period, what we have done, what we hope for coming forward. Karen is joining us.
Oh,
Very
hey,
nice.
Karen, are you
Shabbat
sending this?
Shalom, Rabbi Weinberg.
Shabbat
Hi,
shalom.
Karen, how are you doing? Are you
Hi,
sending,
Shabbat Shalom, Carmen.
are you writing an article for the newsletter? Anything at all? I don't care. Whatever it is. The more we have, the more we can go through. Are you sending us
Writing and
anything? A joke and something you saw of interest that you think people might like, something of that's noteworthy, even if it's in another newspaper, I'll just attribute it to the other, whatever it is, anything that you think that someone, people in the congregation might enjoy reading,
okay. And when would that be due?
yesterday.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Doesn't give me much notice.
Also,
Would
Karen
I
asked
have to
about
do it on the computer? How is it done? Is it
You
done on the
can do it on the
computer?
computer. You can do it if you have just email it to me. Or if it's a link,
Okay.
email the link to me or
right.
something, as long as I have
Yeah.
investigative reporters going out and giving me the information.
Okie
Okay.
dokie, Carmen.
Jeffrey will put it together.
Okay. And I've got. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. I have my prescription for what we do to keep sane and healthy during this period. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
sending that.
brilliant.
Yeah,
All right,
it's
so
what
that's
I've
the
done.
front
What
page article.
yeah, what people can do.
So,
So it's two. I actually have two things.
oh,
You can
perfect.
position
Do you
them
have three?
whatever you want.
Do you have three? Hey, Sarah. Do you have
Okay.
three, Rabbi?
Three. You can cut the two into three. What do you? Well, we'll need something more specific about Pesach because I just wrote generic. But
Oh,
then
I
maybe,
know. I haven't thought it through as yet. What did we do for Pesach last year?
last year we did online. I had some
Okay.
videos that Andrea prepared, some clips from online, and then some readings. Right. That's basically what we
Okay.
did. And I can look for some script, nice script, and I can weave it into the
Why can't we?
service.
Isn't there a script out there that we can all perform for Pesach?
I'm gonna see what there is. If not, I'm gonna look for lines that we
I
can pick
bought
up.
this. I forget what book it was. I bought a couple of years ago. I gotta look it through my library
Yeah.
and find it
Yeah. I mean, I've got
because
long lists of parody songs. That's
yeah.
okay.
Well,
But
parodies are kind of hard when you're doing them
online, yeah.
with people who
But
don't know how to sing like me. So because
right.
there's no way I'm gonna sing, not a
I
chance. I
yeah.
don't even do that to myself in the shower.
Yeah. But there
So
may be some nice but if we want something written nicely that's not child. I mean,
yeah.
that is a light humor, tells a story, light humor, not too heavy overboard
Right. So,
okay. Well, we're
whose
going
love the
to
room is that? Is that you?
I've got Joe here also. Joe's with
Yeah.
us. Joe, you look so good in combat fatigues. I'm telling you, I don't want to mess with you.
Thank you.
I wouldn't want to meet you in a dark corner. No. Okay. Oh, Marcel's coming on board.
There he is.
How does he feel?
Good. So let's go ahead. We're going to start up in the morning. Musical meditation warm up to get us where we want to be, where we want to get to emotionally for Shabbat. I'm going to start right here. This is that group. We had this fellow Yuval with us a few years ago. This is from his ensemble. It's a Yemenite song. He calls it Unity of the Heart. It is the Yemenite prayer of longing for the peace. Okay, it goes on, many variations. You can see the response, the refrain, chorus sound in it. He's not the Yemenite itself. The singer's been able to carry the style. So you notice even the hand motions are very typical of Yemenite music. So it gets us into the mood. The rock we call the sources in our own hearts. He's modified the text of the prayer. The prayer is a prayer of longing for redemption and return to the land of Israel. And there's that faith that kept that community together over 2,000 years till they were all restored to the land of Israel in our time. Let's go ahead. We open the service to Shochenad.
Shochenad.
Joe, leave me. Go ahead, go, Joe.
Shochenad, Maram v'kadosh Shemo, v'chatuv neran tzadikim ba'alunah, ileshon narat tehila, b'fi yesharim tis halal, v'devrei tzadikim tis bora, v'shalom chasidim tis ramam, v'kerem kadosh tis kadash, v'chalos Rivois, Ankobais, Yisrael, Perino is poor, Shimcha Malkan, Vador, Shekain, Vacholas, Vakoyatar, Rivnechadon, Vahan, Lois, Vahala, Shabbat, Vafer, Mer, Hadar, Livarcho, Amchobay, Vekayam, Kol Divrei Shiroi, Tishbochois David Menisha, Avdecha, Mishirchecha.
Let's all join in. Yishtabach,
Shimcha, Malkat, Malkeinu, Laila Melech HaKadosh, Oshaman was Kila Chudu, I was on the Shira, I was in Eizmam Shuneitza, Gebedet to be voice, the voice, Kadishis, Bachas, Baruchas, Vahodas, Me'akriyat Olam, Baruch Adonai, Ein Melech Gadol Batishbachot, El Adon, Adon on the voice, Habor, Habashira, Zimra, Melech El Chai,
Olamim. Thank God you still remember your Ivri. Good. It's good davened. Oh, we're going to the Baruch together. We'll open up the service officially. Baruch et Adonai Amevorach. Baruch Adonai Amevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Mechol HaMitzvah. Baruch Hashem Choseh Shalom U'Varei et HaKol. Praise the Lord, creator of light and darkness, creates peace and creates everything. All that is, creation and destruction, being and non-being, light and darkness, all has one source to it. And we continue now, El Adon. And I have a lively El Adon for us. Here we go. And we can then follow along with them.
El Adon al kol ha'masim, Baruch Adonai Godloi v'tuchoi ma'aleom, Nasos chunos oi v'vimoidom, Am Yistoreh al chayos HaKodesh, V'nedor b'chol ha'amor, Zchus u'mishorei lifnei Chesed v'rachamim olechem oivim, Toivim ve'oros bo'oloi kedom, Tzom ne'las v'mino v'azkei, Koyach u'onos ha'goel, V'yos mo'ishvim ha'keret le'mever, כל השמש ויזרחו, כל והזכיר צורת סגונו, שבח נסינו כל שלום ארון, כברך סגונו, שרופים לחיוש מהחיוש, ויפני הקודש.
us in a good mood for the morning. And we join in then with the angels, the princely angels in the fiery house, and using the words of Isaiah and Ezekiel to imagine them singing the praise of God. Do we continue the bottom of the page there in front of you? כולם מקבלים עליהם עוד מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת ורוח וזפר עמה, קדושה כולם כאחד וירא, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, ארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת שרפים, גם משבחים ימים ברוך דבר אדוני ממקומו. ברוך נמות יפתנו. I continue with the theme of the lights. We sign off with the Or Chadash, who created a new light on Zion. And there's a melody for this that came out of the Jews of the Soviet Union and became adapted to this, which was originally a Russian melody, turned into saying no, no, never, never at all. And then it was adapted to this Or Chadash. So it goes this way. You may be familiar with it. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir v'nizkeh kulanu meheira le'oro. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir v'nizkeh kulanu meheira le'oro. Baruch ata Adonai yotzeh ha'me'orot. There's a song associated with the refuseniks who insisted on leaving to come to Israel. People like Nathan Sharansky, people of that caliber. And we continue with the Ava Rabbah, song of thanks for the gift of the Torah. Ava Rabbah Haftanu Adonai Eloheinu Em Lagedol Avitera Hamata Aleinu Avinu Makenu Ba'avur Avoteinu Shebatchu Becha Avinu Makenu Vate Lamdem Chukei Chayim Kein Techaneinu Lamdeinu Avinu Navarachaman Amrachem Rachem Aleinu Etem Belibeinu Lahavin Lahavin Lisaskir Lishma Lilmod Lilamed Lishma Velasot Olekayeh Kol Divrei Talmud Toratecha B'Yahava Ereinu B'Toratecha V'Dahaber V'Beinu B'Mitzvotecha V'yached lehevaveinu li'ahava u'lira et shemecha v'lo nemosh le'olam va'ed v'lo nemosh le'olam va'ed Ki v'shem kodecha agadol v'hanora v'tachnu Nagilav and Ismecha, Nagilav and Ismecha, B'Shuatecha, V'Avienu L'Shalom, Abba Kanfot Haaretz, Tolicheinu Tomemiyot Le'atzeinu, Yepoe Yeshua Tavto, V'Novachata Mikolam V'Lashon, Eraftanu L'Shimcha Gadol, Selah Selah Be'emet, Nahodot Lecha, U'Yachedcha, Baruch Adonai, and together, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, V'Yahavta et Adonai Elecha בכל
בכל
לבבך,
כוחך,
ובכל
בכל
נפשך,
נפשך,
ובכל
בכל
מאודיך,
מאודיך,
והיו הדברים האלה אשר
אשר
אנוכי
אנוכי
מצווך
מצווך
היום
היום
על לבבך,
על לבביך,
ושיננתם
ושננתם
לבניך
לבניך,
בדברתם,
ודיברתם
בשבתך בביתך,
בביתך,
ולך בדרך שוכבך,
לחזר
ובקומך,
בקרבך,
וקשרתם לאות
וקשרתם
על
לאויס על
ידיך,
ידיך,
והיו תוספות
והוריד
בין
טובות
עיניך,
בין עיניך,
ודחפתם במזר
ודחפתם
ביתך, וישעריך.
בעציך ובשעריך.
Continue silently,
הוים
to
שמוים
tone the
תשמעו
collective, the national obligation to love God. And we continue the bottom together. Vayomer Adonai Moshe Lemor, Daber Bnei Yisrael, Mata lehem vasu lehem tzitzit, al kandei b'gehem ledorotam, v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'tir techelet, elachem letzitzit uritem oto, ushartem ekom mitzvot Adonai, vasitem otam v'lo taturu acharei lebavchem v'acharei nechem, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם גירושים לכם. אני, אדוני לכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. True and faithful Lord your God, emet, true and faithful and loyal and responsive. Yatziv benachon v'kayam. And now we continue with this tribute to the sense of fulfillment of God giving back love in the form of redemption, as we experienced it in Egypt, as we went from slavery to freedom at the shores of the Red Sea. We continue the bottom of the page. Moshe uvnei Yisrael Hanashir of Samharabah Ruchulam, Mi Kamocha Ba'elim Adonai, Mi Kamocha Neda Bakodesh, Norati Los Osefele, Shira Dasha Shimpu Geulim, Shimcha Asifatayam, Shira Hadasha Shimpu Geulim, Shimcha Asifatayam. Yachad kulam odu, Yachad kulam odu, v'mlichu v'yam loch le'olam so Yisrael kuma v'yezrat Yisrael ovdechinu mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael Galeinu Adonai Tzivaot Shemo Kadosh Yisrael Baruch Adonai Gal Yisrael. And we're going to continue now the Amida together, and we'll all join in. We stand from our positions. Adonai sifatai tiftachu pi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elhei Avotenu Elhei Abraham Elhei Yitzchak Elhei Yaakov Elhei Sarah Elhei Rivka Elhei Rachel Elhei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Adonai El Yom Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei V'Gad B'neihem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Moshe Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Upokei Tzara Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechai Metim Atah Rav Loshia Mashiv Haruach Morid Hagashem Mechakeh Chayim Bechesed Mechayeh Meitim Berachamim Shomech Noflim Berofei Cholim O Matir Asurim O Mekayeh Emunato Lishenei Afar Mikamocha Ba'Geburot O Mida Melach מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. We can do the Kedusha together. Karishim Chabalam, Kishem Shemakishim Atarish Memaram, Katuv Ayad Nebiachar, Karzazaviyama, Kadosh, 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 Aranai Tzivaot, Aretz Kivodo, Ozbekol Rash Gadol, Adiv Chazak Mashmim Kol, Et Nasim L'Matzerafim, Noktam Berchom Meir, Baruch Kvaranai, Mimek Tohohomo. وممك مكينة فيها بتم خلقكم حكمنا الله متى تملك بسيون قرب من بتيشكن بتتكادش بتوك يروشلايم Vador Olenetach Netzachim V'yereinu Tirena Tirena Mechodecha Yadavo B'shirei Uzecha Ayidei David Messiach Tzidkecha Yimlo Haranai Le'am Elohayich Tzion Dovodo Hallelujah. And let's join Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador Ledor Vador
Nagiga Lecha Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador
Ledor
Ledor Vador Nagiga Lecha Ole Netzach Netzachim, Ole Netzach Netzachim, Kedushacha Nakdish, Shemchacha Eloheinu, Me'ipinu Lo Yamush Le'olam Va'ed, Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador, Nagid Lecha, Ledor Vador,
Ledor Vador
Ledor Vador,
Ledor
Nagid Lecha, V'shivchacha Eloheinu, Me'ipinu Lo Yamush Le'olam Va'ed, La 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 la
Baruch Adonai
Baruch Adonai Ma'el HaKadosh.
Yismach Moshe
Silently, I'm going to scroll through the pages.
Shem Shalom. I was faithful to Rachmacha, Shalom, Shalom.
Okay, I'm going to go to a reprise of some popular parts of this. when we go to the Birkat Kohanim, we don't really do it that much because we're doing what we call the Hecher Kedusha both ways. And it's only done when the cantor does the full repetition of the Amidah. We don't have any Kohanim who know how to do it. So we're going to, I have this beautiful rendition of the Birkat Kohanim for us. I put the page up in front of you, and you can follow.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך פניו אליך ויחונך יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך לך
I'm surprised how much very moving music is coming out of Spanish-speaking countries. Right? That's why you see the transliteration based on Spanish and translation into Spanish. And now let's go ahead to Sim Shalom, the very next one on our list. This with cantor Marcus Feldman.
Sim.
Barecheinu Avienu Kulanu Kechad Be'or Panecha Ki Be'or Panecha Natat Lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat Chaim Ve'avat Chesed Utzedaka Uberaka Verachamim Vechaim Veshalom Tov beinecha levarech et hamecha Yisrael et hamecha Yisrael בכל עת ובכל שעה
Can't different sign of sin. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful rendition. You know, I'll say this, I find missing in so many of the contemporary cantors today, products of the current cantorial schools, they're missing that tremolo that is so classic of Ashkenazic cantorial music. Very, very Jewish tone, that tremolo. I don't do it. I can't play it. But it's not that many of the modern cantors do that, and that has a certain poignancy to it that then gets lost. Okay, we'll go ahead now to wrap up the service. Going to come to a unit of study. Let's break up for a second and greet everybody here who's joined us so far. I see Doug came along, Joe and Lulu. Who else? Judy joined in. Also, Rachel. Shabbat shalom to all of you. Marcelo.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Okay, good to see everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Joe.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Okay, Joe, Joe Young, are you gonna try to comment on the portion? Or no? Because I won't throw you on the spot. Okay. Anyways, it's very technical, so I don't understand. I've got some visuals for us to make it work. Okay, that's it. Now I go back to the share screen and to our unit of study for the day. Let's see if they're gonna get it up. There we go. I got it. So still with Rabbi Yossi Omer. Yeah, I love this. I squeeze out these rabbis. They say 3 sentences, and I take 3 words, and I take 1 word a week. That's the best way to do it. So you have Yossi. First, he said, "Watch out for your fellow's property." Then he said, "Prepare to study Torah, because that's not something you can inherit. Knowledge doesn't come through the genes." And then, "B'chol ma'asecha yu l'shem shamayim." All your actions should be for the sake of heaven. Why should you do what you do? You should not do for purpose of monetary gain. You should not do things for the purpose of pride. You should not do things for the purpose of, even of getting into heaven or getting out of hell. Not even for that. It's just your job should be to do what you do for the sake of heaven. That's your job. In Jewish thinking, that, as I look at later commentators, that becomes a real foundation of, we may say, the Jewish attitude towards all that we do. It is that every action, kol masach, I wake up. What does a Jew do when he wakes up? You ever read the Shulchan Aruch? When you wake up, you wash your eyes because the gook on your face is dangerous. You put your shoes on. The right shoe, then the left shoe. The right lace, then the left. Why? To be focused. To start your day with focus. Something as simple as putting on your shoes. Start your day with focus. And then you have to meditate on the idea, and this is the opening of Shulchan Aruch, and it's in earlier sources also. you should be strong as a lion and brave as a leopard and the swift as a gazelle and powerful as an eagle to do God's will. That's the focus in life. And this is what kept Jews going. Not the contemporary Jew. Contemporary Jew, like everybody else, is what's in it for me. That's it. It's comfortable, I'll do it. Not comfortable, don't do it. But that's not what Jews lived for. That's not what Jews lived for. So they took every moment. And so they said, even so, I eat, not because the food tastes good. If it tastes good, it's okay. But I eat because I have to sustain my body. Why do I sustain my body? Because how else am I going to do a mitzvah? How else? I'm going to do business. All right, so I'll make a lot of money. Fine. Why? So I can live like a king? I'll live like a king. It's okay. But it's so I can give tzedakah. It's so I can support people. So I can support scholars learning. Okay. And even if in love, okay, it's nice. It sounds good. Why? Because that's what God wants me to do. Right? That's the thinking. That's the thinking. It is one of my professors in rabbinical school said this is what Judaism has, what's called normal mysticism, knowing that you're not going up to the Himalayas, you're not in a convent, you're not out in the desert, although Jews did try it one time. You live your normal life and you turn everything in the normal life into sanctity. That's the idea. As I say, modern Jews, we're not very good practitioners, but at least if we have that thought in our minds, it may help us in our mindset to get through the day with a goal and with a direction and purpose. Okay, with that, we continue the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba. V'yama divrach chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon, v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman karim v'imru amen, Yehei shmei Rabba vorach v'olam omer maya, Yitborach v'ishtabach, v'yipa'ar v'yitaman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dikudsha berichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, davyom be'amar v'yivru amen, Ar Yisrael v'ar Rabbanon, Ar Tamidei Hon, Akol Tamidei Hon, Commando Skim V'oraita, Tivrat Rahadem v'di v'chol atar v'atar, Hey lahon ulachon shlomo rabba china chizarachem, Hai narichim zonei diche, V'karam v'karam avuhon di b'shmar v'imramein, Hey shlomo rabba min shemaya, V'chaim aleinu v'akoi sevim amen, Ose shalom b'imrama, Uyase shalom aleinu, V'akoi sevim Amen. Amen. Marceli, I saw your note. If anybody knows if my tone fades out and so on, do let me know. I have a very good microphone, but sometimes within the system it'll drop. It's supposed to be on automatic volume control, but it may drop. So just let me know. Keep me posted. We're going to continue now. Our Shabbat service sponsored by Hollywood Temple Beth El, your local and international congregation. A word from our sponsor. We appreciate your support through PayPal, temple@htbl.org, or plain old-fashioned checks and even cash, although that's a little hard today to deliver. And keep us going. With that said, we are in our chapel, figuratively at least. We want to be in the chapel.
Yeah.
And the way things are going, we're closer to the end of the tunnel. Closer. So we'll be back in.
Let's hope.
That's right. That's right. And let's go ahead with the Ein Kamocha. We open our service. Ein Kamocha B'Elohim Adonai, Ein Kamasecha, Machut Chamachut, Kol Amim, Umemshaltecha B'chol Dor V'Ador, Adonai Melech Adonai Malach Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed, Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitein, Adonai Yivarech Et Amo B'Shalom, Avor Rachamim, Eitiv Avitzon Ha'etzion, Tivnei Chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei Chomot Yerushalayim, Kivecha levabatachnu melech Eram v'nisa Adon Olamim. Vahi ben Saron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai v'yachutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. And we continue with the prayer in front of the ark. We join in Be'anarachet Ve'lishmei Kadisha Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatu Bechan Be'anarachet Be'anarachet Ve'lishmei Kadisha Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatu Bechan Yeher Rava Kadama Tiftach libi be'oraita, v'tashlim b'shalim b'libi, b'lechol amav Yisrael, l'davu chayin v'le'eshma. Amen. Where are we? Okay.
Shema.
There we go. And we take our Torah figuratively from the figurative ark and repeat after me. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadol Adonai Kitiyunero V'Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedol V'Hatiferet V'Hanetzach V'Ahod Ki Chova Shamayim U'Va'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha V'Mitnaseh L'Chol Rosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'ishtachavu l'Adam raglav kadoshu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'ishtachavu l'Ad kadoshu Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. And now we come to our reading of the Torah portion, and we are in the portion of Titzaveh. Last week it was collecting the charity, the funds. It was an introduction to Jewish fundraising. You know how far back it goes, and then it was designated for the different items. And now we come into the actual instructions of putting things together, the who's doing what, and so we are in Titzaveh. And at this point, we are with the preparations of the clothes of the Kohanim, the Big Day Kehuna. And so it's a little bit hard to figure out, and even from the text, and a lot of the commentators also realize that as they're reading it, it's very difficult to visualize. When you have a verbal description, when you try to convey it to a written prescription, it's not quite so easy. So I pulled up a few illustrations. For example, I said, let's see what it looked like. Because the Kohen Gadol, what they point out is that he's to dress in this way, litiferet. And so who needs the tiferet? God doesn't need. Tiferet means beauty, grandeur. God doesn't need beauty and grandeur. But the public needs to see it. They have to have an elevated sense. And for that reason, the Kohen Gadol had to be physically complete, in general good health, visibly good health at least, and we would hope impeccable character, and married to one woman, and all sorts of conditions. So because he's coming in to represent the children of Israel, he carries on his shoulders, for example, you see on the side the golden clasp, and on that golden clasp the names of the tribes of Israel on two stones, onyx stones. And as he bows inside the Kodesh Kodeshim, he's presenting the tribes of Israel on his shoulders to God. He's representing them. The same thing on his headband. He has, they use the word mitre in English, sniff, mitznefet, a bound like a turban. Some of the older English use the word tire. I realize that the word tire that we put on our cars comes actually from that sense, that it is a wound like turban. And then blue lacer, I have no idea what he means by blue lacer, L-A-C-E-R, but we do know that he wears a golden plate over his forehead that says Kadosh Ladonai, dedicated to God. As he has to have on his head that he has only one job. He's going in before God. He has to remind himself that he's there dedicated to God, while he is reminding God that he's there for the people of Israel. And then we have the Urim V'Tumim. Urim V'Tumim. Well, let me see, where's Urim V'Tumim? This is it. Urim V'Tumim. Who went to Yale? Anybody went to Yale or visited Yale? You see, Urim V'Tumim looks at veritas, and it's translated in light and truth. We don't know really what the Urim V'Tumim meant, but we do know that Urim sounds like light, Tumim from tam, complete and whole in intention. So that's what we know. What we do know is that the Kohen would be called upon to act as an oracle. Not that he was the oracle, but the king would come and say, do we have war? Do we not have war? Go in. And they would light up, or he would get some signal through them, and thereby convey the message of God to the king. That was what it was associated with in biblical times. And then behind it, or with it, is the breastplate. So it's a little bit vague. Is the breastplate the Urim V'Tumim? Is the breastplate what we call Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate of judgment? But we have on it, again, 12 beautiful gemstones representing the tribes of Israel, because he's speaking on behalf of the people of Israel. That's his function. He's presenting them to God. The clothing, linen breeches, right? Underwear, right? The priests would not go up without underwear. What did everybody wear in the Middle East? Nothing under the robes. King David, when he comes back, bringing the ark back from Philistine captivity, he's dancing, and everybody sees his attire works. That's how people dressed till today in the Middle East, right? You got a robe, that's it. No, the Kohen had to be covered. In a sense, there's something we want to distinguish the physical, sexual body from the emotional, spiritual body. I want to distinguish between the two. The Hasidim still have it. The idea of the gartel. You ever watch Chabadniks? When they're going to pray, they put a rope belt around the waist. It's to say we're providing the upper and the lower functions. Right? We're trying to use our mental and spiritual faculties, not our animal faculties, the bottom half of us. And that's the intent. So we have still, the Kohen has a belt. He calls this a curious girdle. I don't know why he's using the word curious girdle for this. The ephod. The ephod, here too, we're not exactly sure how it's designed, but it's like an outer coat. Like an apron of sorts. Over body. So there's a coat and there's an overcoat here, and then the linen robe. And then at the end, golden bells shaped like pomegranates, and maybe they're not made like pomegranates. And the idea is, as the Kohen walks in, the bells ring, should not go into the divine presence without some kind of announcing of himself. Right? It is, again, it may be as much for the Kohen to feel that he has to prepare the area, as for God needing a bell to make him listen. So a little bit more. What else do we have there? Okay, a little close up of the Choshen Mishpat. You have a little bit better picture here. The stones, the gemstones for you. Okay, so now with that now it becomes much more easy to follow. So let me go back to our reading and
Rabbi,
go ahead.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
the Christian or Catholic priest have a clothing similar to this, more similar to this description than anything Jewish I've seen.
It's a very good question, and that's worth looking up. To what extent the robe of the Catholic priest, the Pope especially, in the garments is trying to reflect the temple priest? Is a very good question. It would seem that there's an intent of carryover. I'm curious also in the Orthodox Church or the Coptic Church to see if the chief bishop or archbishop also in that case has, the clothing is intended to reflect a tradition of what may have been the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. On the other hand, the title of the Pope is Pontificus Maximus, the high priest, which is Latin for the ancient Roman priests. So, that's a good question. To what extent are they carrying which tradition? That's worth looking up. It's worth looking up. Marcel, I give you an assignment if you can look it up and tell us. All right? That's a very good one. Okay, so now let me pull up for a second. So we're going to be reading verses 31 through 38. Let me pull this up.
31 to 38.
Yeah, that's the part that we are reading. And here are the terms. The Me'il, Haifod Klil Techelet, a robe of the ephod pure blue. Okay, and then the way it's woven and the bells on the rim and so on. That's the part that we are reading. So, Joe Sr., Commander Joe, General Joe. Those of you who were with us on Purim, he was really decked up. Okay, go ahead if you'd lead us in the opening blessings.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Baruch Lambad.
Baruch Adonai Baruch L'Olam Voed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher b'chabonu mikol u'amim. V'natam lanu es Terusah. Baruch Atu Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. And Joe Younger, if you'll pick it up
Yes.
from there.
Okay. Amen. ועשית את מעיל האפוד כליל תכלת, והיה פיו ראשו בתוכו, שפה יהיה לפיו סביב מעשה הורג, כפי תחרה יהיה לו, לא יקרע, ועשית על שולב רימוני תכלת וארגמן ותועלת שני, על שולב סביב ופעמוני זהב בתוכם סביב, פעמון זהב ורימון פעמון זהב ורימון על שולי המעיל סביב, והיה על ארון לשירה ונשמע קולו, ובבוא אל הקודש לפני אדוני, ופצעותו ולא ימות, ועשית ציץ זהב טהור, ופיתחת עליו פיתוחי חותם קודש לאדוני, ושמת אותו על פתיל תכלת, והיה על המצנפת אל מול פני המצנפת, והיה על מצח הארון, ונשא הארון את ארון הקודשים אשר יקדישו בני ישראל לכל מתנות קודשיהם, והיה על מצחו תמיד לרצון להם לפני אדוני.
So there, you can see here the that word that was on that picture that said a blue lacer. It just means just a thread of blue, a cord of blue that held the golden plates in place. There we go. Okay, we have some English that people use that no longer is in use, and sometimes we have to break our heads to see what they had in mind. With this, let's go ahead now and invoke prayer for the well-being of those who are in need of healing. The Shabbat, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarif Karachev Laya. May the Holy One who blessed our ancestors, Mary, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal all those who are ill, Esther, Elisheva, Pinchas Bertoskovsky, Miriam Leodorf, Yashev Ben Galina, Moisey Kelchik, Mindy Levins Pfeiffer, Jennifer Levins, Ronnie Duran, Harry Levins, Moisey Ben Manya, Barbara Mormon, Esther Gerson, Jeffrey Buck, Joe Alexander, Robert Drato, Roger Rosen, Rachel Flalo, Jenny Drato, Michael Schinder, Susan Tuckman, Shirley Marco, Fear Feinberg, Judy Alkaline, Richard Zeller, Libby Masha Ben Sarah, it was Jacob, Miriam Ben Yitzhak Ben Chanum, mother of Cantor Isaac Bodai, Liva Batsara, Chana Batsara, Eliyahu Ben Chana, Herb Mormon, Rina Sepian, Shoshana Batsara, Chana Sarah, Leah Bat Rachel, Chana Sarah Bat Kayla Alta, Alan Whalen, Hira Nessi, Sophie, the friend of Judy Alkali, all those who are afflicted by the virus and in need of healing. And please add your names. Joe, why don't you start?
Yehuda Noach ben David Mordcha ben Yehuda Noach.
David Mordcha ben Yehuda Noach.
Sima Harlev.
Sima Harlev.
Ronan Ter Harlev.
Roman Ter Harlev.
Susan Feinberg.
Susan Feinberg.
Sharon Lippman.
Karen Lippman.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
David Moshe ben Sarah.
Moshe ben Sarah.
Shalom ben Lazar.
Shalom ben Lazar.
Ronald,
Rachel Bet Ventura.
Rachel Bet Ventura.
Tito and Gabi Gorodisha.
Tito and Gabi Gorodisha.
Ronald Rothman.
Ronald Rothman.
Wendy Keller.
Wendy Keller. Okay, and anyone else who is ill, we have in our minds and in our hearts, whether we've added them orally or not. So all of them, we have them all in our thoughts at this moment. And we go ahead with the Mishaberach. This one, Choral Mishaberach from San Diego.
Help us find the courage to make our lives a
blessing. Let us
May the
blessing, and let us say,
once before.
Was fine. Let us say, Amen.
I never cease being amazed at how they can put these choral compositions together. Because as you notice, there's a several second delay when you're doing Zoom. So it cannot be live completely, but then that means that they have to be doing recordings separately, and somebody's putting it together so they all match perfectly.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know how they did it.
That's what they do. That's what they do. They all do it separately. They go 1, 2, 3. They say it, and they sync up all the 1, 2, 3s.
Right. But the person who's doing the syncing has to know, has to be very good at it. It is. They're very good. Okay. With that, we come to the Haftarah.
No, prayer for Israel.
First the Haftarah, then the prayer for Israel. Haftarah from Cheskel. The Torah reading was about the Kohen Gadol and the close of the Kohen Gadol. And so the Haftarah to parallel is looking at Ezekiel's vision of what it would be like when he envisions the return of the children of Israel to the land of Israel and reestablishing of a temple in his day. Now, one of the interesting things is they notice that there's a discrepancy between what he describes about the Kohen and the Beit Mikdash, the new temple, and the one that was actually built with the Ezra and the Nehemiah, and later on under the Maccabees and Keheret. Very different. So the classical commentary has been Ezekiel is looking to the future, the third temple, when all is back in place correctly. The second temple was an interlude. The future temple, messianic, the ultimate messianic, that's what he's envisioning. So that's how they, we will put it in this way, they make it work. Okay, and so begin. Let me get the line, exact line that I'm starting. 31. There we go to line 31. Wait a minute. What was that? A second, bear with me. All right. 4310. There we go. 4310. All right, so now, here is what God tells Ezekiel. אתה בן אדם הגד את בית ישראל, את הבית ויקמו מעוונותיהם ומרדי תכנית. נכלמו מכל שעשו צורת הבית ותכונתו, מוצאיו ומעבר וכל צורותיו, כל חוקותיו וכל צורותיו, כל תורותיו, הודע אותם וכתוב לעיניהם, וכל צורותיו וכל חוקותיו עשו אותם. זאת תורת הבית, על ראש ההר, כל גבולו סביב, סביב קודש קודשים, הנה זאת תורת הבית, ואלה מידות המזבח, ואמות אמה, אמה טפח וחק אמה, ואמה רוחב, וגבולה על שפתיה סביב זרת, האחד וזה גב המזבח, מחייק הארץ, על הזרה התחתונה, 2 אמות ורוחב אמה ואחת, מהזרה הקטנה עד הזרה הגדולה, 4 אמות רוחב אמה, והראל 400 מאריאל, ולמעלה הקרות 4, והראל 12, אורך ב-12, רוחב רבוע על 4 רבעיו, והזרה 14, אורך 14, רוחב על 4 רבעי הגבול סביב, אותה חצי האמה, וחק לה אמה סביב במעלותיה, פינות קדים. One of the terms that is unique to Ezekiel is the term for the Temple Mount, the center of the temple, the Ha'ariel. Ariel or Ha'ariel. Could be the mountain of God or the lion of God, depending on how you envision it. And the name Ariel, which is my granddaughter's name, it comes from this Ariel, from those words. All right, so now we come to the prayer for the people of Israel, and who suffers with the prayer for the country. You can always use a lot of prayers for our country at all times. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry, safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
And now for the people in the state of Israel, Cantor Rachel Goldman, magnificent voice, prepare for the people of Israel. Now we return the Torah to the Ark. Our figurative Torah to our figurative Ark. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Kines Gashem Levado, Hodo Aleret Vishamayim, Vayarem Keren Le'amot Tehila Alecho Chasida, Livnei Yisrael Am Kerovo. Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Mizmor David. Avul Adonai b'nei Elim, Avul Adonai kavodos, Avul Adonai kavod Shema, Ishnach Avul Adonai b'hadar kodesh, Mayim el kavod yirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai ba'akach, Kol Adonai b'hadar, Kol Adonai shaver azim, shaver Adonai etazeh havanon, Yakim k'megel b'msiryon, kemo b'neimim, Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachim midbar, Yachil Adonai Mimakadesh, Kol Adonai Cholel Ayalot, Yachsov Yoreh Hakulo Omer Kavod, Adonai Lama Avon Yosha, Vayeshev Adonai Ne'elam, Adonai Olam Yitein, Adonai Yavarech et Amo V'Shalom. And we return the Torah to the Ark. It's Chaim here. It's Chaim here with this rendition. Still on vinyl, I guess. Here we go. Here we go. We'll sing along. Walks along.
Eitz Chaim hi Lamachzikim V'samcheha Meyushan Eitz Chaim hi Lamachzikim V'samcheha Meyushan Deracheha Darchei Noam V'chal Nesivoseha Shalom Deracheha Darchei Noam V'chal Nesivoseha Eitz Chaim hi Lamachzikim ba V'samcheha Meyushan Eitz Chaim hi Lamachzikim ba V'samcheha Meyushan Deracheha Darchei Noam V'chal Nesivoseha Shalom Hashivenu Hashem Elecha V'nashuva V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Yameinu
So we have Walt Star Sefer Torah back into the ark. Continue with Enke Eloheinu, Cantor Naftali Herstig, and this Wunderkind that he has here. So I can pull it up. Okay, and we'll follow along. Enke Eloheinu.
Moshe נודה למלכנו, נודה למושיענו.
ברוך אלוקינו, ברוך אדוננו, ברוך מלכנו, ברוך מושיענו.
אתה הוא אלוקינו, אתה הוא אדוננו, אתה הוא מלכנו, אתה הוא מושיענו.
אתה הוא שהקטינו אבותינו לפניך, את קטורת
Applause for them, and we'll go ahead with Elena. Elena the Shabbat Ladon, Hakol, Lo take it all out, say every sheet. Elo Sanake Hanatzad, Velo Samanu, Mishpachat Adama, Kelo Samchakenu Kahem, Vigar Elena Kechol Hamonam, Vanachnu Korim, Umishtachavim, Umodim, Lifnei Melech, Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shunot HaShamayim, V'yosed Haaretz, Moshe Mikaro Bashamayim Mimal, Ushchinatu Zo, Begavim Merahomim, Ueloheinu Einod, Emem Akeinu Ebezulato, Kakatu B'torato, V'yadata Yom V'ashivata Elevavecha, Yadonai Elohim, Bashamayim Mimal, Yalaretz Mitachateino Deinod. And we turn the last phrase, V'ne'emar B'haya Adonai Lemelech HaKoharetz Yomahu Bayom Adonai Echad Oshemo Echad. And we come now to the Kaddish. Recall those loved ones who passed away this year, this season, in previous years. Arthur Linsk was a beloved past president of Hollywood Temple Bethel. Many of you may still remember Frances Linsk.
Yeah.
I think, is she still alive? I'm sorry, Carmen, do you remember?
No, I don't think so.
Passed away. Oh, she was dear, and her sister.
Yeah.
Also, and Peter Bralinovsky, Esphira Weinemann, and my father, Rabbi Dr. William Weinberg. I'm going to be talking about him later on. And then that's occurring this year. Those who passed away in this year: Ilanit Bat Yitzchak, mother of Dr. Isaac Norman, Harry Kyle, and Davis Wenker, Jack Petska, and all those who passed away of COVID in this past year, a number exceeding 500,000 in the United States alone. We hope that we're getting to the end of that horrible nightmare. And with that, let us join in with the Kaddish together. Yitkadal Shemei Rabba, Yamad Ibram Chilutei, Yamlichutei, Chayachon V'Mechon V'Chay L'Chol Beit Yisrael, Argalav Zman Kariv Yimramei, Yehei Shmei Rabba Borach L'Olam L'Mei Maya, Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Pa'ar V'Yishmar V'Yitnasei, Yithadar V'Yitalev Yithalal Shmei Kucha Berichu, Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Tush B'Chata V'Nechmata, Damram V'Yomar V'Yirmei, Yehei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemayim L'Chaim Tovim Aleinu V'Koysev Yirmei, Ose Shalom B'Mamar, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Koysev Yirmei. Amen. Amen. And we come to wrap up service, Hollywood Temple Bethel, your local and international synagogue. We welcome your support in all ways and venues. And now instead of Adon Olam, I'm going to switch. This is, yesterday was Purim. The second day after Purim is Shushan Purim.
Shushan Purim.
Shushan Purim. Shushan, Susa. That's the term used in European sources. Susa. Also, I think maybe also identified with Persepolis, the capital of Persia, of ancient Persia. And so it is because in Shushan, as the Megillah tells us, they need an extra day to get organized. And so they celebrate Purim on the 15th, as everyone else on the 14th. And then Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is Jerusalem, Jerusalem developed a tradition that it would celebrate Shushan Purim. So if you're in Jerusalem, you celebrate Purim the second day. So I said, well, it would not be appropriate to let Shushan Purim go by without something related to Persia. So I found Yigdal with this lovely Persian singer, melody. We can follow along.
יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח, נמצא והנה תל מציאותו, אחד ואין יחיד כייחודו, לעולם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו. אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו. כמו אדון עולם בכל נוצר, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפעם נבואתו נתנו, אלא שסגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שהוד, נביא ומביט את אמונתו, תורת אמת נתן לימואל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו. לא יכל לפעל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו, צופה ויודע סתרנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומל לאיש חסד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רע כרשעתו, ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחכה קץ ישועתו. היי! נצים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעה על שם תהילתו. נצים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעה על שם תהילתו. נצים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעה על שם תהילתו. נצים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעה על שם תהילתו.
So we can imagine for ourselves, this is the singer is, I didn't get her name here. We can imagine to ourselves Esther singing something just like this to King Ahasuerus, same accompaniment. Let's go to Diwan. Diwan is not the name of the singer. A Divan or Diwan is a Middle Eastern collection of songs or poems. Let's see, both Persian and Arabic loan word. Well, let me put this out here. Don't want to get YouTube mixed up with us here. And I'm going to close this down. Also, try to get things out of the screen. Going to go here, stop share for a second. And going to start recording. Going to take us now to a century ago. It's actually almost a century ago, to when my father was a young student, and on this in the Shabbat of my father's Yahrzeit. Next week, we're going to continue. I want to talk about the un-Maimonian scholars, the kind of, we may say, the reaction, philosophical reaction, intellectual reaction to the Rambam, and some great people like, great thinkers like Rabbi Yehuda Levi and the Ramban, Ibn Virol, and just some samples from others, and then move on as we're preparing towards Pesach, start getting us into the theme of Pesach. So I'll come up with some things towards as we approach Pesach. And any topics that you want, please send them to me, and if any of you want to take a topic and step your feet in the water and lead a topic discussion, let me know. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the screen, and I'm going to take us way far back by our time frame. As I said, my father was, for very justifiable reasons, as I'll explain his life story, a late starter in having a family, because he had to pass through World War II before he could get started. So he was born 1901, which would make him now 120 if he had lived that long. He passed away 45 years ago. He was just hitting 75, 70, just about 75 when he passed away. So because we're still within the theme of Purim, I thought I would open with this so you could hear him. I have few soundtracks of him when he was serving as rabbi. Let's see if I can get this one. But this one of a Purim celebration. Let's see if I can get this. Yeah, there we go. Purim celebration in a refugee camp somewhere in the area outside Frankfurt. He was serving as the chief rabbi of the state of Hesse.
Camp was Salzheim.
This would have been outside of Frankfurt. So Salzheim, you say?
Salzheim, yes.
I'm going to take your word for it because I don't have a note.
Yeah, that's where the camp, TDP camp was.
So what I think is it's also being recorded on radio because he talks about my dear listeners. So I think he's there and it's also being recorded. So here the Hazel starts up. You can sing along to that.
Hayom Yom Purim Anoyim Umato Emirot Nezamera Enitmach Ezeito Tzmach Mordechai Tzmach Hatarot Nashcha Lo Netzach Lo Nishkach Hanet Oy Shira Nashir Ki Shushan Ha'ir Haman Hagagi Azmeh שנת יעקב תהל לו ותמך ורותם יחד תחילת מרדכי תשיעו אותם או יתר נצח ותקוותם בכל דור ודור להודיע שכל כוחו לא יבושי ולא יכלמו שנת יעקב תהל לו ותמך ורותם יחד תחילת מרדכי אריר הומן אשר ביקש להביא ברוך מרדכי היהודי ארור הדרש הקט מפחידי ברוך היתר בדי שנת יעקב תהל לו ותמך רותם יחד תחילת מרדכי
Der Winter ist bei uns Juden von 2 Halbfeiertagen umrahmt. Den einen feiern wir am 25. des Monats Kislev, des letzten Herbstmonats, den zweiten am 14. des Monats Adar, des letzten Wintermonats. Der erste Halbfeiertag ist das Chanukka-Fest und gilt der Erinnerung an die Siege der Makkabäer gegen Antiochos Epiphanes, die noch auf eigenem Boden zur Zeit des Zweiten Tempels ausgefochten wurden. Der andere ist das Purim-Fest und gilt der Erinnerung an die glücklich überstandene Verfolgung von Seiten Hamans zur Zeit des ersten Exils im Altpersischen Reich.
Okay, so I'll just give you a flavor of his voice because I'm sure not that many of you are that facile with German. Maybe Joe, you remember enough to follow it, but he's introducing to the listeners. It says the winter is bound in Jewish calendar by 2 festivals.
Adar too.
All right, small festivals. On the winter, the beginning of the winter is Hanukkah, the end of the winter is Purim. And then he goes into the significance of Purim. So I say that's just an experience.
The second Haman.
The second Hanukkah. So now he's reflecting upon what has happened now to the Jewish community and talking to them. Yeah. So now I'm going to shrink this down because I don't want to get this on and move over here. Enlarge the page for us here. 1 second. Make this visible. Okay, good. So I've put this up so it'll be visible for you. So just to introduce you to my father. He was born, as I said, 1901 in Dolina. It was then Austro-Hungary. And he represents the transition from medieval Judaism to modern Judaism. Galicia was relatively slower to westernize. Now, his family they were already westernized. His father already had gone to a public school under the Austrian system. He already saw to it that he went to gymnasia, Orthodox Jew, but made sure his son went to gymnasia. There was the formal high school. But the Hasidim around them were still Hasidim, and they would attack the westernized kids. There was resentment, the old and the new. World War I broke out. He fled from Galicia to Vienna. So you have to understand this. Jews have their social rankings also, like all peoples. And the German Jews consider themselves the elite. They look down on the East European Jews. So he was transition. Like so many of the Jews in Vienna, where they were under the German Kulturkreis, or German culture, but they were of East European roots, what some of the Germans would call halb Asiatisch, half Asian. Well, he was also, as I say, brought up now going to gymnasia in a very westernized or Europeanized education, as well as classic rabbinic Talmudic training. His father wanted both to have both. And so he was in the Hashomer HaTzair. Some of you familiar with that. That was the most left-wing Zionist movement you could be in without being in the Communist Party. Basically, that's it. So the leader of his group was Meir Yari, who became the founder of the Mapam in Israel, Mapam Party. And everybody was a Marxist in those days. Everybody was a Marxist in those days. His best friend in high school later on left to France, became a leader of the Communist Party in France. Later on, he rejected communism, but was a major French literary critic. So that's the atmosphere. So he went to study, he was active in Zionist movement, and he decided to go study political science to advance his involvement. And so he did his doctorate 1928, that's when he got his doctorate. Parliamentarism, System in Crisis. I'm going to talk about what he was writing and how it reflects on our times. And then he went to Berlin in 1932. Not a good time to go to Berlin because within a year, Hitler was in power. Right? He was there in Berlin. He was active in a student at the Hochschule für die Wissenschaft des Judentums, a mouthful. the academy, the higher academy for the scientific study of Judaism. There he is, the young student. I assume this is a picture somewhere when he's a student. There's a seal on it. It was not in color. I have a colorization format, so give him a little bit of color. Here he is as a young man. Now he's about 30, as I can figure. He's visiting with his uncle and his brother on the coast of Dalmatia, right? What's Yugoslavia then? Dalmatia is now, I think, Croatia. Croatia, I think now. All right, notice very nice, full-figured, a happy man, good circumstances. That's the last time he's a happy man for the next 15 years, give or take. That was his student ID, right? So in 1935, he was imprisoned by the Nazis for 2 years. It was set up charges of moving funds, because the Nazis had imposed strict monetary controls. He was helping somebody Jewish move funds to get something set up. Jews are moving funds to try to get things going because the Nazis blocked most businesses. He got trapped. So he spent 2 years. He says actually they were very good years because the Nazi regime at that time did not want to kill everybody. They left him alone. So he was actually able to do his rabbinic ordination sitting in prison by correspondence course. When he got out, he was given his smicha, his actual ordination. Again, by this time, all by long distance, because everybody had scattered. And his thesis was a study of the psychology of Jewish heretics. I've been looking for the thesis, nobody could find it for me, which is too bad. It would have been interesting. This is his prison record. Plotzensee. Plotzensee is Brandenburg near Berlin. So he was there when it was still safe, relatively speaking. You see his birthplace, Dolina, Poland. At that time was now considered Poland, so they used that as the record. Well, he fled first to Vienna because the Germans, the condition to get him out of jail was that he leave Germany, never set foot again. He ran to Vienna, and as soon as the Germans came into Vienna, he wasn't going to wait around, and so he and his brother also fled to Czechoslovakia. They're hoping to go to Argentina, but they never got the visa in time, so they ended up going east instead of west. And lo and behold, the Germans have their march into Czechoslovakia thanks to Neville Chamberlain and Peace in Our Time. And first thing that the Germans did was round up all suspect characters. So they had a record on him. They rounded him up. He spent half a year in a notorious political prison. It was an old castle that had been remade. It was famous as actually prison of the nations. The Austrians used it to capture all their political prisoners for 200 years before that. And it is known as Spielberg. Well, that in German is Spielberg. Hey, there's the Spielberg family. I don't know if they're connected to that prison, but that's the same name. So this is a beautiful picture inside the castle where my father had to spend 6 months. All right, so as soon as World War II broke out, he was released on the German-Soviet demarcation line, just inside Poland when Poland was split up. Was able to escape to the interior of the Soviet Union, worked as a chemist near Stalingrad and later Frunze, Bishkek, which is now Kyrgyzia. It is not far from the border of Xinjiang province, where the Chinese government now has its concentration camps, or let me correct it, re-education camps for Uyghur Muslims, right? That's where, not so far. You ask, how did a rabbi and a doctorate of political science become a chemist? You do what you do to get a job in the Soviet Union. You become a chemist. And nobody has jobs for rabbis or political scientists. And definitely not for members of the Communist Party or the Zionist Party, because those were picked up right away and sent to Siberia. Communists especially were eliminated as quickly as possible. So 15 years go by, my father comes back to Austria. Here's a picture of him circa 1947. He's been in liberation already about 1.5 years. You notice that he's very gaunt and skinny. You look at the picture of him as a young man. He told me, when I was in the Soviet Union, I had actually plenty of food to eat. I couldn't eat it. It was the fear of living in the Soviet system was so great. I couldn't digest what I was eating. So, the end of World War II, he returned to Austria. He headed a People's University for Refugees and DP camps in Hallein, near Salzburg, Austria, in 1947, then served as a lecturer for the refugees under the Jewish Central Committee. And he was going to work on an article, research on life and struggle of Jewish DPs in Austria. I still have his manuscript to that. Okay, here is a picture in Austria. He's rededicating a synagogue in Mozart's Salzburg. And very appropriate for us, it says, Zachor Asher Salacha Amalek. This is the theme of Shabbat Zachor, the theme of Purim. That's him up there on the bima. Jude vergiss nicht das KZ. Jew, do not forget the concentration camp. Right? There's that tie-in. So, 1948, he served as the first Landesrabbiner, state rabbi of Hesse in Germany. That's Frankfurt in the region. That's where I was born, and chairman of the Union of Rabbis of Germany. His chief task was to unite the German and East European survivor communities. There was still a core remnant of the original Yekes German community, and then Europe was flooded. Germany was flooded with East European Jews. It was the safest place for Jews after the war, under the American army. Not so much under the British. Their areas were the conditions were much harsher. And Bergen-Belsen, much harsher conditions. But he was in a good position because he was both East European and German, Kulturkreise. So he could communicate between the two sides. And he also coordinated efforts between the American officials and the new German government, especially in the fight against the resurgence of Nazism and anti-Semitism. Nazis were still active. The underground was still active. So this is from the bulletin of the High Commissioner. I'm going to enlarge this for you a little bit so you can see here from the dedication of the synagogue in Frankfurt. It still exists. It's been remodeled since then. Beautiful job of remodeling. You can see this was 1950. The speaker, Max Meyer, the head of the community, was my godfather, and his was the brother-in-law of one of the major was a German general that signed the surrender terms. Because he had a Jewish he had a wife who had a Jewish brother, or something like that. That's how he saved. He survived. And here is my father holding Torah scroll. In the center is the cantor. There's my father. And there's Rabbi Blut, who was his Dayan, the rabbinic judge for the Jewish community, towards the Orthodox community, who signed my documents when I wanted to get married, proving that I was Jewish. Here he is at the center stage. Notice that he's wearing a beret. He refused to wear the classical rabbinic hat, which was like the bishop's hat. He said, we are going to be this thing. The choir, and you see the pipe organs, it's the second largest organ in Germany, was in that synagogue. And here the dignitaries, the retiring ECA mission chief in Germany, the wife of the High Commissioner, John J. McCloy, the federal minister for refugees, and the president of the German Central Banking Council, right? Some major dignitaries appeared at that. Let me go ahead, go back to size down, and then came to the States in 1951, served as a rabbi in several congregations, member of the Rabbinical Assembly, passed away March 16, 1976. So his documents are at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and there's a link if anybody wants to follow it up to find the actual documents. So what's my theme for today? When I'm going back now, it is just about 100 years ago. Okay, just about 100 years ago, my father enrolled in the Faculty of Law at the University of Vienna. Faculty of Law was a cover for a lot of social sciences, and not just law. And his area was Staatswissenschaft, right? The science of running society, political science. So my father typed his thesis at the time. Hitler had just come out of Landsberg prison and had not had a single electoral victory. His Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, that's the Nazis, barely scored a few seats in the Reichstag, the parliament. Nazism was so insignificant that in this thesis, my father did not mention it. Right? He was writing in 1926, did not mention Nazism. This was the golden Zwanziger, the golden 20s, the roaring 20s, the Weimar Republic, roaring 20s in the United States, the world economy was solid. It's not yet 1928. For the most part, Woodrow Wilson had succeeded in his goal. The world must be safe for democracy. Certainly was in Europe to most part. It seemed to everybody, but not to the highly observant student of political science, young William Weinberg. William in English, Wilhelm in German. He was just 25, and he typed his thesis, Parliamentarism, System, and Crisis. So he finished his studies, defended his thesis, and November 14, 1928, received his signed doctorate. Very good period to get the doctorate. It was almost 10 years to the date of the armistice, 10 years after the armistice of World War I, November 11, 1918, that war that would make the world safe for democracy. 10 years later, almost to the date, the opening would bring us to the opening of the genocide of the Jews, Kristallnacht, November 9, 1938. Right in between these two significant events. So here's the cover of his thesis. My father's cousin had been was able to go to the University of Vienna sometime in the 60s and was able to find it and was able to get the copy out for us. This is the actual doctorate, notice in Latin, and the name on top, pay good attention, Theodorus Initzer, and his signature on the bottom. Why is that significant? Here's the man who was the rector of the University of Vienna. And this is him a few years later in his robes as Cardinal Initzer of Austria. This is the cardinal who would be known as the Heil Hitler Cardinal, right? Because the same Initzer invited the Germans to protect Austria from civil war and breakdown. He signed the doctorate that talked about the breakdown of democracy, parliamentary democracy, and was the man who brought in Hitler because he was afraid it was the only way to save society in Austria. And he and the Austrian bishops had admonished Austrian Catholics then to vote yes in a plebiscite to agree to the Anschluss, the union, and signed it with Heil Hitler, Time magazine reported in that year. The Pope was furious with him, and the cardinal later on would regret his decision. He did realize it was a tragic mistake, but it was too late. So here's what's relevant for us. I'm going to read you some excerpts from the doctorate. There's this young kid who's barely wet behind the ears. He talks about modern culture. We're so proud of the result of the creation of our modern culture, and we're so accustomed to see in the parliamentary system the last word in political culture. We have hardly recognized that it has begun to degenerate. It's losing its purpose. So we've come to this time when the parliamentary system becomes the topic of debate, which its flaws are widely known, and the whole world is speaking of a crisis of the parliamentary system. Now, parliamentary system, different than the American system in that it is a multi-party system, where the parties, the leading coalition of parties decides who runs the government. American system, it's a winner-take-all, two parties, and president separate from the parties. But the problems are similar. Signs of this crisis can be found in all European states, not only Italy and Russia, where new political systems instead of parliamentarism are being created, right? Fascism, Mussolini had just taken over, Russia, Lenin had just taken over. We have in mind those countries with strong parliamentary constitutions. France, England, Germany, by now actually had a strong parliamentary system. I mean, it had an existing parliamentary system also under the Bismarck, under the Reich, under the Kaiser. It had a parliamentary system, and also smaller states. Overall, we find an inability of the parliamentary system to guarantee a proper and stable leadership, create a good and lasting government, and provide a beneficial and ordinary administration. Look at Italy. Government every 2 days. Look at Israel, parliamentary system. It's going through its fifth election. You can see how there's an inherent instability in a parliamentary system. So he looks at the aftermath of World War I and the failure of governments before, during, and after. Failure to prevent the war, failure to lead the war well, and failure to wrap up the war safely and well. So there's been an all-around failure of belief in the system. The masses see how parties tear and throw at each other. Just listen to our parties today. tear and throw at each other, as the members of parliament speak and speak without end and achieve nothing concrete. British parliaments, they really know how to shout at each other, if you ever listen to them. Israeli Knesset, just listen to them shouting at each other. Americans are very polite compared. There have been disillusioned and mistrusting, seeking other forms of political leadership. So the idea of a dictator is today popular in many European states. Parliamentary rule is ever more unpopular. Its existence is in danger. Many political thinkers, historians, and philosophers of history see its imminent demise. Right? We have a sense of this. When the Soviet system fell, there was a major historian said this is the end of history. Basically, the procedure of history now leaves the door open for democratic governments. And it has not been, it's happened, and then it's been shrinking back, where we see a strengthening of not necessarily dictatorships, but authoritarian rulers. Turkey, Russia, we see it. So the origins of the decline go to the origins of the parliamentary system. In other words, the system has its own failure built in. Two key foundations. The first foundation, the principle of democracy, that the people alone determine their fate. The second foundation, the principle of representation. It's impossible for each citizen to be directly and constantly involved with all political questions. Each is a representative who is appointed, makes decisions in his name. When the Americans are debating the Constitution, they are looking at the same question. They're very well aware of this problem. And the only society where it had existed, where people actually vote, was in Switzerland. But Switzerland was a small country divided into small cantons. So it was easy for everybody to know everybody and to get together. You have in the United States a few places where you have something like a town hall.
But the Americans did not design a parliamentary or a democracy.
Well,
they did not design a democracy. It is not. This is not a democracy. It's a republic.
Okay, so
that's not what we've designed here.
Right, the republic that's a shift, and he talks about that later on.
Yeah,
but we still have some of the similar problems. It was intended to try to avoid it. So look what happens then. So they become disillusioned and mistrusting, seeking other. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Parliamentarism is therefore representative democracy, and the very principle of representation from its beginning, there is a danger. Montesquieu and Rousseau at the time already foresaw this danger and recognized the contradiction with democratic and representative principles, right? There's a conflict. The will of the people cannot be truly expressed only through their elected representatives, they point out. The representative must willingly or not twist and falsify the will of the people. We have this, always this sense, the people we elect are not really reflecting what we want. We have this distrust. The prophecies of the theoreticians of modern democracy have shown the more the parliamentary system has developed and the greater the state has become, so more rich and complicated has the political life become. And more the parliament becomes independent, absolute, unaccountable to the people, a world to itself. Right? In other words, the governing body begins to be disconnected from the people that have elected it. So, politics has become a science with its unique discipline, methods, and secrets. Today, it is so complicated and twisted that the common man with average reasoning ability cannot find his way in it. All questions and problems in the political world become part of a completely new system. Its solution no longer depends on the real necessities, rather on the laws and tendencies of the immediate moment. If you follow how are decisions being made, you have what's the word? They do these focus groups. You have a focus group, and a focus group, and you come up with what's the key word that we're going to use? What's the sound bite we're going to use? All these things. And again, it's both the American system and the European system. We are jockeying for position, and the public feels it. So the politician has become a new entity. He's no longer the representative of thousands of fellow citizens, no longer the fighter and spokesperson for the others. A man for whom politics is his calling, who has become an expert in the wisdom and secrets of the hidden science of politics. Right? You make your way up, you know your way, that's where you're going through. Must be our legal framework today no longer managed by the parliament. Instead, it has become a matter of state bureaucracy. If anybody's read Kafka, The Process, right? He's brought up for a trial. He has no reason, he doesn't understand how, he doesn't understand what, he can't get in, can't get out. That's the feeling of the citizen in the state bureaucracy. And that was Czechoslovakia was carrying over the rules of the Austrian system because it broke out of that. So this happens naturally when one thinks of what degrees of knowledge and expertise it is necessary to shape a law. So we're going to make a law. You know how a sausage is made. You don't want to know how sausage is made. That's what happens when you're shaping a law. Or what is a camel? A camel is a horse that a committee put together. So increasingly, the politician loses the common interests of his constituents, and less does politics arise from the realistic needs and wants of the people. Its key issues of contention nothing to do with real life, and it becomes purely tactical politics for its own sake. The parliament has ceased to be a suitable apparatus for dealing with the public good, resting on the most possible broad foundation, stands for artful and electioneering mathematics. Right? We follow it. I mean, we've sensed that in the United States also. I'm running for election. I am feeling this group is this percent, this group is this percent. And it's a contradiction built into any kind of representative system. You can't live with it, you can't live without it. Delegates no longer represent the people against the state authority, right? The state. You listen to people talking today. Also, the state, the bureaucrat, anybody who's worked with any kind of government agency in any position, top or bottom, understands. When you're dealing with the bureaucrat, you talk to the wall sometimes. Right? They fail to act as a vent for individual initiative and freedom of the soul. Delegates' legislative effectiveness identify with the will of the state and its political activity. His attachment to the influence of party organization restricts himself to the influence of the party leader. Now, to some extent, the American system, you could break from the party, right? You have more personal representation. The British system also, there is more ability to break from the party, but they're still playing a lot of these number games.
It's a bad system.
Who said it? Democracy is a terrible system, but it still beats anything else. That's the problem. It's built in. It's inherent in the system. So it's no wonder people are disappointed and indifferent to parliament.
That was Churchill.
Churchill, that's it.
That was Churchill.
Right. Parliamentary politics, they lose their loyalty. So then he talks about, well, what happens then is other countries are looking for new political form to inherit the role of the parliamentary system. So now in Europe, two such systems, fascism in Italy and Sovietism in Russia. Notice he's not even talking about Nazism in Germany. Nazism really is a different beast even from fascism. And it goes far to the extreme of fascism. What the advocate here about fascism, what the advocates of just dictatorship intend is the application of extra parliamentary means to achieve political demands. Understand that those who have a far and wide view and can move above the needs of separate groups can, seeing the hardship of the totality, see this machine that makes much racket and much of little good. Therefore, they're dissatisfied. They think of the dictator as someone who can lead people by stark will over all difficulties. Right? We have a weakness for the strong man on a horse. And so the Italians went that route. And then, of course, he follows up and he says, the problem will be that it is only as long as that strong man is in existence. The strong man falls apart or dies, it's very hard to follow through on that. And so the fascist system, he says, would eventually disintegrate. It's dependent on an individual. He says the other system provides the great concept that's missing in fascism. So fascism was built on the strong man. The other system is built on concept. The Soviet state upon a new foundation, the economic basis of means of production, derived from the Marxist concept, economy is the central force of history. So life is organized so the individual can find his purpose fulfilled to the highest in the productivity of the factory under control of the workers. That's where, when the worker controls his production, he finds his highest productivity. He is tied to his labor. Its failure lies in the overestimation of the significance of economics. People cannot establish a political organization on the basis of economics alone. It's too fully subject to industrialization. And this is 1928. They're not yet aware of the extremes in which the Lenin-Stalin system is enforcing collectivization at the cost of tens of millions. and at the cost of tremendous shutting down of individual thought, and at the cost of eating even their own leaders and leadership. That comes out later. So on the other side, so he says, well, here's the conflict that we see today. Labor organizations, European labor organizations, more heavily socialist than Americans, bend parliament to their will in that direction. On the other, corporations back nationalist movements. So there's Awakened Hungary, Fascism, Orjuna, Yugoslavia, Ku Klux Klan in America, which press on parliament, right? So you have in these democratic systems, these two contradictory forces weighing on the parliamentary system. And then, as it says, well, Italy and Russia been taken over completely. Italy, fascism is a corporate fascism. It's a state fascism, state corporation, much like China is a state corporation, not truly a communist system, state corporation system. Russia is the communist system. The state owns everything, lock, stock, and barrel. So he goes on with what are contemporary attempts in his day to reform the system and increasing methods of direct democracy by the initiative process, right? Which he says at that time, which I said had become part of American polity, right? The referendum was the beginning of the 1900s when we get the referendum system in California, for example. And that also has its problems because who's pushing the referendum and what, at what interest? And is it really being sold as what it says? And then by stating the value of more direct voter choice of the representative, as in the British system, right? I mentioned that, right? Because in the British system, you are voted by your community, not in the European parliamentary system where you're one slate across the country. The ideas of plebiscite and referendum return rule to the people, not the party machinery, right? That was what they were hoping for. But even voting for a leader independent of a party system and voting for referendum, they're still easily manipulated by vested interests of left and right. So left, he concludes, this is his hopeful conclusion at the end, the parliamentary system of necessity has to survive. It's still the one essential necessary form of a structured society. This makes the need for reform even more vital to prevent the demise of parliamentary democracy. All right? So in Germany,
Germany was suffering a big recession at the time, so the parliamentary system failed to provide a better economical situation, I think.
So I asked my father about that, and he said, you know, he said that the German economy was still much stronger after World War I. It still was stronger than the other European states. And so, they had the tremendous inflation right after World War I, where they were taking a wheelbarrow to buy full of marks to buy a loaf of bread. But they quickly reorganized themselves. And so he says, you know, relatively speaking, the Germans were not bad off. So it was not so much the economics. The economics is one factor. The other factor was the resentment of loss. And I think this has been widely remarked that when the Germans surrendered in World War I, they had not suffered. The French suffered, and Poland suffered where the battles were, and Austria-Hungary, that's where the battles were going on. But inside Germany proper, or Austria proper, there was very little damage. They did not see, and they could not see that their army was basically worn down to nothing. And that's why the army had to surrender. They could not see it. And that's why the Germans felt betrayed and couldn't understand that they had lost. And so they were easily sold on the idea of Dolchstoß. We were stabbed in the back, we were betrayed. Well, who betrayed us? You look for, well, who stands to benefit? Oh, the Jews, right? That made the Jews a very easy target. Certainly in Germany and Austria, those two areas.
The Jews are always a target.
It's an easy target, you know the story that an anti-Semite and a Jew are debating, you know, what's the cause of everything, and the anti-Semite says the Jews are the cause of all our problems, and the Jew answers back, yes, you're right. And also the bicycle riders. And the anti-Semite looks at him and says, why the bicycle riders? And the answer back and says, why the Jews? It's just as much logic. But you don't need logic to target frustrations, and frustrations can come from anything across the board. Our worry here, then I said, we have a lot of frustrated people. Can we direct frustration in a positive direction instead of a negative direction? And that's going to be the big challenge between left and right. And we are very polarized right now. You can say that, well, they're like this or they're like this, but we have to get across that polarization somehow. So these, I pulled these out. My father went on, as I say. He then went on to understand physically what it is to live under a fascist regime, a Nazi regime, and then under the pure Soviet system, and came away hating both systems, obviously. And when he got in the United States, felt that the American system's so much stronger and healthier. And it's ultimately the two-party system, for all that we get upset that you don't feel that it really represents, because the two-party system ultimately must negotiate between each other, it prevents a complete imbalance in either direction. Because neither party can afford to miss the middle. So as much as they may shout, we want X, or we refuse Y, ultimately they manage, at least historically they managed. So he said, look, in the 1930s, after the Great Recession, the recession in the 1930s was much worse than for Germany. But and the United States was on the verge of some fascist takeover, could have been on the verge. The system responded. And so there are questions. Well, did Roosevelt really do the right things with the work programs and all the other social programs? And as far as economics go, maybe they didn't work. Where they did work was giving people a sense, well, we're trying something. And when people feel we're trying something, so they have hope, so they're willing to go along. And that was, the balancing act that American system has managed to carry out. So we hope that continues, that we continue this balancing act, bringing the opposites together rather than at each other. And and it's a hope and a prayer. So those are my thoughts in memory of my father on this Yahrzeit. And I hope in my prayer that our system does carry through and does work its way correctly.
Rabbi,
go ahead.
You mentioned before that your father was there when Hitler came out of the prison from Landsberg.
Yeah. Oh, you had.
I was in this prison in 1946 for 3 days.
Oh, nice place.
I was in the same prison, and then I was in Landsberg from 1944 to the liberation, actually. It was in a camp called a sub-camp from Dachau. Camp number 7 was in Landsberg.
Yeah, that's it. Look at these places that we end up in. Yeah, you've been in every notorious place. What can I tell you?
Yeah, I was 3 days in that prison.
Yeah, Landsberg. So the prison my father was in, the one in Berlin, first he was arrested and taken to one called the Moabit. That was his interrogation prison. And later on, it was a notorious place for the Nazis to put their undesirables. And then Brandenburg, where he spent the main time, also after he left, was used as a place where they would execute their unwanted political leadership. By the way, in prison, he said they were either communists, which made sense, or real Nazis. In other words, as soon as Hitler came to power, you may know, he immediately arrested his true believers. There was another leader, Romer, who was even more militant than Hitler. And Hitler recognized immediately that Romer would move things too fast and wasn't there. So he arrested his followers and put them in prison also. Just like Lenin and Stalin, when European communists escaped to Europe, they immediately put them in prison because they recognized that they were communist idealists who really believed in the system, and they would start making a ruckus. And so they put them away also.
Yes.
And that's all right. That's how you maintain control. You control your true believers, in order to be able to get what you need. Ah, that's the real
power,
world.
Rabbi.
Huh? That's how you keep power. That's right.
That's about power. That's not about ideology.
Yeah, but your power. But you know what? People gave in. At least in Stalin, you read the trials, the kangaroo courts, and so on, and the people who are going to be liquidated actually believe they deserve because they let down the great leader, and if you used your true believers' belief in you to maintain that power. And then that's what they call the useful idiots.
Yeah.
The searchers use that term. The
People
useful
who were sent to the gulags didn't believe that Papa Stalin, Joe would have done that.
Yeah.
Believe it. They thought he was the greatest.
Okay. So Papa Joe and all the characters. Okay. So I wish everybody a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
And good health and
Good
get out
Shabbos.
and we get out of the virus healthy and well as well. Okay.
Shabbos.
Everybody, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good
Good Shabbos.
And Shavua Tov, everybody.
A good Bach also coming up. And we'll start getting ready for Pesach.